the heck does a DC-3 remain hidden in a salvage yard surrounded by a city in Maryland for over 30 years? And speaking of time, folks, today is actually Buffalo Airways 50th anniversary. Yes, May 13th, 1970, Buffalo Airways was founded. And there's a secret to longevity that I want to talk today, folks, because today's episode is all about the glorious cargo door. Cargo doors are absolutely amazing and probably one of my most favorite things on aircraft. I know it sounds very strange, but that is what's kept Buffalo Airways going for this long. We're going to interview my father towards the end of the video, and we're going to learn the first airplane Buffalo Airways had and its secret to its longevity, well, in the context of a cargo door. But let's get to that mystery aircraft. How did this DC-3 drop onto our laps? Well, it actually came from a viewer just like you. The gentleman's name's Matt. He sent me an email at PlaneSavers@gmail.com and said, hey, there's remnants of a DC-3 in the backyard. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Can you send me some pictures? And he was like, wow, I got some bad news. The airplane's being cut up. I'm like, oh, dang. So really no chance of flying out. But there's actually something I've been looking for a long time for DTD. And let's just get to this. What's the history of this airplane? How did this airplane end up here? First of all, Matt told me he knew nothing about the history. He said the owner who bought it passed away. He had it for about 30 years, and all he knows is that it crashed in the Mississippi River. And I was like, well, send me the registration. We'll take a look at it, see if we can find it. So he did. And funny enough, the registration he sent me is for a Stearman. Had nothing to do with the DC-3. So I was like, I don't know. So I searched a whole bunch of different variants. I could not find the airplane. So I put Stella on it. Stella, my girlfriend, she is a DC-3 historian just like me. So she started searching and she figured out that the registration has been tampered with. That's not an 8. That's actually a 6. And once we had the real registration, well, we found the history of that airplane. The aircraft was built in 1942 in Long Beach, California. In April 1943, the aircraft was ferried to England, where it joined the 436th Troop Carrier Group. On June 6, 1944, the aircraft dropped paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne during the D-Day invasion. On June 7th, the following day, it also towed gliders to reinforce the Normandy beachhead. September 1944, the aircraft dropped troops from the 101st Airborne during Operation Market Garden. For the rest of the war, it continued to tow gliders and evacuate German POWs. After a taxiing incident in 1946, it was sold to surplus. It ended up being bought by the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1951 and operated with the 429 Squadron out of the Winnipeg Air Force Base, up until it was sold for surplus to the Basler Flight Service in Oshkosh, May 1975. With its new registration, November 59316, Basler sold it to its final operator, McNeely Charter Services, on October 24th, 1985. After 12 years as flying as a freighter, the aircraft was damaged beyond repair on a forced landing on November 7, 1997. The aircraft took off from Gulfport, Biloxi Regional in Mississippi en route for the 333-mile flight to the West Memphis Municipal Airport in Arkansas. The DC-3 had 2 flight crew on board. The captain had a total of 7,853 hours, of which 2,603 hours were on the DC-3. The PIC stated he was established on an instrument approach into AWM when the left engine fuel pressure dropped to 0 and the engine quit. He moved the fuel selector to the right rear tank and the engine started. He continued his approach for about 2 miles when the right engine quit, followed by the left engine. He was able to start both engines briefly, but that was short-lived and both engines failed again. He made a forced landing on a sandbar just south of AWM. Both pilots were not harmed, and the aircraft was considered a write-off. Examination of the airplane revealed that the fuel tanks were not ruptured and the fuel tanks were empty. The NTSB stated in their final report that the pilot in command's improper management of fuel resulted in the total loss of both engines due to fuel exhaustion. There's a lot of history there. That airframe has seen and been through a lot. Unfortunately, about 7 years ago, they cut the nose off for a pretty good cause. It went to a Veterans Memorial Museum and turned into basically a spooky replica, even though this is a D-Day airplane. Anyway, I'm just happy that it's in a museum and not being crushed. Now we got to save the tail. Unfortunately, this is not the time to be traveling. If you're watching this in the future, it's 2020 right now, so you know what's going on. We're not allowed into the States. What the heck am I gonna do? Because I made a deal and I bought that tail. What am I gonna do, folks? Well, if you remember, when we got DTD, the airplane that we saved last year, it doesn't have a cargo door. So when I first seen it on eBay and it had the man door, or what we call air stairs, I was completely disappointed. And actually, it took me about 3 or 4 times to look at it. I just said, no, it doesn't have a cargo door, not interested, until I found out it was a D-Day machine after just doing actually a little bit of reading. But so I was going through my head is like, well, with this aircraft, it really should have a cargo door, aka also a jump door, so you can actually do paratrooping. So now here's the thing. Here is a cargo door, a D-Day cargo door. The frame, the cargo pad, everything is there, and we're gonna go get it as soon as the borders open up. I'm super, super excited because we're gonna put a cargo door back in DTD, and what better cargo door to use than a D-Day machine, especially an American D-Day machine, which are even rarer. Very, 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 very cool. But also, I did mention it's Buffalo Airways 50th anniversary today, and we're not really celebrating, we're not really doing anything because we're postponing it, just like everything else, to next year. So let's go back in time and think of a more simpler time. 50 years ago, what was Buffalo Airways' first airplane, and how did Buffalo Airways survive this long?
Yeah, 50 years ago today, we went to Edmonton, got ourselves a Norseman, and went off to seek our fame and fortunes in the Northwest Territories where we lived. Anything that had to move to the north, the Norseman was the machine of choice. I take it my father, who had been a prospector and a mining blaster, threw a bunch of his old camps up around Great Bear Lake. We spent a couple of days going through all the old camps, and he was showing me the buildings. He said, this building came in on a Norseman. You see how the plywood is cut? And he said, this one came in on a single otter. See, it's not cut, it's a full sheet. And I said, well, maybe it came in on a Norseman, but they had this door modified by then. They came along and modified the door. He put an insert at the top, and that allowed us to put a 4x8 sheet of plywood inside the Norseman. So now we were on par with the single otter when it came to hauling plywood into the outback for people to build their mining camps or their trapping camps or whatever camps they needed.
How important is cargo doors to the longevity of Buffalo Airways?
Well, we are cargo. We are Arctic cargo. We've always been cargo. So if we run another 50 years, we got to have cargo doors and everything, whether it be Electra or whatever it has to be. We have to have cargo doors because we are cargo haulers. This is my teenager car. Look at the last time it was licensed, 1971. So things don't really move here very quickly into the new world. I just love this old car.
What's your thoughts on the cargo door being part of the DC-3's longevity?
Well, that really made a DC-3. I mean, that cargo door that was designed to take a Jeep or Brent carrier. See, that Jeep back there fits in it's perfect to go in a cargo door. So people always call you up and ask, how big a parcel can you take, or how big a box, or how big a piece of machinery can you fit? And we used to say, well, if it's the size of an Army Jeep, it'll fit. Pretty soon, people didn't realize what an Army Jeep looked like, the new generation. So we said, hey, if it's smaller than a Volkswagen, or no bigger than a Volkswagen, it'll fit in the airplane. So anyway, that's how it was in those days. So they're still modifying airplanes for cargo doors. So this cargo mod coming out of the 40s and 50s, nothing has changed, you know.
So here's a question, 50 years, what's the next 50 gonna look like?
What's the next 50 look like? Well, look what happened in the last 2 months. I couldn't judge that. How are you going to judge 50 years? But 2 months ago, the whole world was different, eh?
We are definitely living in some uncertain times. Look at that, some modern aircraft being scrapped or turned into freighters, and we're looking to turn our D-Day machine in Red Deer back into its D-Day glory with a cargo door slash jump door. If you wanted to see what those C-47s look like in the Canadian Air Force, check out this video right here where my father gives us a tour. I can't wait until next year when we can actually celebrate Buffalo's 50th anniversary. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you in the next one.
I was wondering yesterday, Joe, what's this for?
I don't know. That's where the APU exhaust.